I think we covered all of the all of the mental all of the omnipresent mental factors, and then it's just at the very end it just summarizes them again. Um, mm, what is contact? So we did cover contact. Yeah, I said transformation is not a good word, I think. Oh, no, 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 no. Sorry, that's not true. Where did we get to last time? The definition of contact. I think we hadn't covered contact yet.
Yeah,
the attention we didn't do it.
Oh, we
the
didn't
last
do
two.
attention either. Okay. All right. Oh, yes. So we covered, we finished intention, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Then fourth is attention. Okay. I'm trying to think, is there anything else? That seems to be all. Yeah. So fourth, the definition of attention is a mental factor that by its own power directs the mind. I have a hard time with the word directs here. I mean, with the translation of the Tibetan. Directing the mind. Because previously we had moving the mind. That seems to be so close. So moving the mind, directing the mind. I think like placing the mind, focusing the mind. Yeah, focusing the mind would be okay. Like moving the mind versus focusing it or placing it on a particular object. I think that's here focusing or placing the mind would be a better choice of words. So like instead of directs the mind, yeah, placing the mind or focusing the mind, with which it is concomitant, because we need a certain degree of focus. I wouldn't call that concentration, but just a particular moment, um, a particular time frame, or a particular, yeah, like a period of time, however short that may be, that allows for the mind to know its object or be aware of its object. Well, be aware anyway, but most importantly, know its object. So that's what attention does. So a mental factor that by its own power places the mind with which it is concomitant on a particular object. The difference between this and intention is that intention moves the mind with which it is concomitant to a general object, and attention places the mind on a particular object. I mean, moves the mind and directs the mind, aren't they the same? Pretty much, aren't they, right? Moves the mind, directs the mind. Okay, there's more of a movement. Maybe maybe intention's got just kind of a directionless movement, whereas attention has a certain direction. So maybe in that sense. It's difficult to just go according to the Tibetan because it could mean either this or that. Anyway, okay, so with which it is concomitant toward a general object. Attention directs the mind toward a particular object. All right. Toward a general object and a particular object. Okay. The Compendium of Knowledge says, what is attention? It is mental engagement that has the function of mentally apprehending the object. Right. Okay. Directs the mind toward a particular object. Yeah. I find that difficult. Pardon?
Is it placing the mind toward an object or with an object? I mean, on or on an object.
On an object. I would say placing the mind on an object. When it says that intention only does so in general, while attention towards a particular object, that doesn't make sense to me, because sometimes, of course, if you have many objects, and then you choose a particular one, that makes sense. But like with a conceptual mind apprehending the vase, what would be the general object? What would be the particular one? Right? So therefore I would rather say it places the mind on its object. Okay, so this is definitely what the translator, what the author said, like a general object or a particular object. But well, it's again debatable. It's just one of those things that are not absolutely clear. So with the sense consciousness, it makes sense. With the conceptual mind, I find that a little difficult to differentiate between a general object and a particular object. Anyway, so the Compendium of Knowledge says what is attention? It is mental engagement and so forth. Then fifth, the definition of contact. Contact is a mental factor that once the object, the sense faculty, and the sense consciousness have come together by its own power, selects an object in accord with whatever feeling of pleasure and so on is to be experienced. Select. I think it's rather settles on a particular object. Selects is almost like, oh, not you, not you, not you, oh, it's you. I mean, like, okay, so it's not that process, of course, obviously. So it decides on a particular object, but I'd rather have, I mean, I think settles on a particular object is better. So you move towards the object, you focus on the object, and then you settle on an object. Right? Move the mind. Yes, please.
Select be more the job of attention, like selecting.
Yeah, selecting would be be more the job of attention. Yeah, I agree. Whereas settling on an object is like done. You know, made your choice, so kind of chose something.
Yeshima, all the mental factors have to be like concomitant in terms of the object, right?
Right.
Because it kind of seems that that there's instances in which contact and attention have like different objects.
Yeah, there seems to be a sequence.
Yeah, no, not only a sequence. I can be like, for example, I don't know, like in a class or something, and thinking about something completely different. Like my attention is somewhere else.
Oh, yeah, but then your attention is with another mind. So like before, you see, like for instance, we talk like that. We say my attention is focused somewhere else, as if one mind had attention and a different one didn't. That's what it sounds like. But actually, this is something that was mentioned earlier. Sometimes some of the functions are stronger. For instance, like when you have an indeterminate perception or an awareness to which the object appears but is not ascertained, there is attention, but it's not fully functioning. Your attention is stronger, concomitant, or it's stronger in the case of like an eye consciousness. So you're totally absorbed in listening to music. Because of the strong function of attention that is part of that eye consciousness, while there's still attention with your ear consciousness I meant. So you're listening to music and your ear consciousness is so attentive, attentively directed towards that music, so absorbed in that music, so that that the eye consciousness no longer has enough attention to know its object. Does that make sense? So there is attention there, but it's not fully functioning.
So there is contact with two objects at that time, like ear consciousness has contact with music, eye consciousness has contact with...
Yeah, both have contact with different objects.
Both contact with different objects?
Yes, absolutely. They have
you have attention to both, you just have like more attention to the music than to the flower.
Exactly. In fact, you have 5 sense consciousnesses active. When you're awake, you have all 5 sense consciousnesses active. But whenever one of them knows its object, the others don't. Which means they're inattentive perceptions, which means their attention. So I guess it's like that if we have attention with all 5 minds, and on top of that there's attention for the 6th consciousness, there's attention with that mind as well, but it's never strong enough to equally allow understanding of all objects. So it's interesting why that is the case. I wonder how like a person who has tranquil abiding or calm abiding, do they have enough attention? In that case, is the attention strong enough to be equally divided among these 6? I don't know. It doesn't say anything anywhere. And I've certainly never heard that a person who's got calm abiding, they don't have an awareness to which the object appears but is ascertained, because they're so attentive to anything. I mean, I know a Buddha, in that case, is different, right? So it's an interesting kind of idea. What is it? All the other mental factors can be fully working. Well, again, are they fully working when you have like the 5 sense consciousnesses? Is there like a pleasant feeling? Can there be a pleasant feeling simultaneously with an eye consciousness and an ear consciousness? Probably not. Intention, attention, and contact, do they all work equally with equal strength? No, probably not. No, probably not. Again, you have 4 of them are inattentive awarenesses or perceptions, and 1 can know its object. So only with the mind that knows its object, the mental factors, the omnipresent mental factors, are fully active.
Right.
Right? That would make sense.
But they are also present, though not fully active. They are present in all the consciousnesses.
Yeah, they're present. There's a certain degree, a subtle degree of their function there, because otherwise they couldn't be there in the first place. However, it's not enough for the mind to know its object. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so the mind, by its own power, places or settles on an object in accord with whatever feeling of pleasure and so on is to be experienced. The phrase selects an object or settle on an object means to settle on a particular object as its own unique object, once the object, sense faculty, and sense consciousness have come together. So first, of course, that needs to precede that particular sense consciousness. Here it's just talking about sense consciousness. Of course, needs to also be applied to a mental consciousness. But yeah, anyway, this sense consciousness does arise only once the 3 conditions have come together. The phrase, the object, the sense faculty, and the sense consciousness have come together. Oh, the sense consciousness is mentioned here as well. I wasn't paying attention to that. I mean, the previous moment of awareness, they have to come together. So the immediately preceding condition, the objective condition, and the dominant condition. But here it's actually mentioning the sense consciousness itself. And then it explains the phrase, the object, the sense faculty, and the sense consciousness have come together does not indicate that they have come together at exactly the same time. No, but they interact with one another, if you like. So for the sense faculty, which is the dominant condition, and the sense consciousness, which is based on it, are sequential, not simultaneous, of course. Thus the phrase have come together refers to the 3 conditions, the object, the sense faculties, and the sense consciousness being complete. All right. So what is contact? It is what determines transformation of the sense faculty once the 3 have come together. I would say it is the settling on an object when the sense faculty has transformed upon the coming together of the 3. That's how I would translate this phrase. Going back to the Tibetan, it's what determines transformation of the sense faculty. It's like once the 3 have come together, then the sense faculty transforms. That doesn't make sense to me. I don't read the Tibetan in that way. So here I would translate once again, what is contact? It is the settling on an object when the sense faculty has transformed upon the coming together of the 3. That would make more sense to me. So the sense faculty changes moment by moment, of course, but we say when it acts as a cause, it has to transform in order to give rise to a result. Take something as a seed, or the water and the fertilizer, all these are the causes of the sprout, but they can only act as a causes of the result, which is in this case the sprout, if they transform. So if there's any transformation taking place, then that is not once the 3 have. Oh wait, let me just look at it again. So if the sense, once the 3 have come together, is what determines transformation of the sense faculty. Upon the coming together, it's the same. It is settling an object when the sense faculty has transformed. It has transformed upon the coming together of the 3. Was there a question? No. Okay, anyway, that's just that quote. Never mind, it's not that important. The basis, when categorized, has 6 types, from contact, when the visual sense faculty and so on have come together, to contact, when the mind sense faculty and so on have come together. The reason that the 5 mental factors, feeling and so on, are called omnipresent is because they accompany every cognitive event. Indeed, if any of the 5 omnipresent mental factors were lacking for a mental state, then the object would simply be no experience. Were there no discernment, there would be no experience. Were there no discernment, it would be impossible to apprehend the unique distinguishing characteristics of, or the characteristic of the object, or to differentiate the object's attributes. That's also clear. Were there no intention, there would be no moving toward an object. Were there no attention, there would be no focusing on on a particular object, or placing the mind on a particular object. Were there no contact, there would be no here it says meeting, previously was selecting. There would be no settling on and the object. So for the mind to engage an object, the 5 omnipresent mental factors must be fully present. And then you've got the quote. I don't think I need to read through the quote because it's really just saying the same thing. Okay, so to be sure we will finish in time. Today I'll cover the mental factors which are with a determinate object, and then tomorrow we'll do the last chapter after virtuous and afflictive minds. Okay, so second, the 5 mental factors with a determinate object are aspiration, resolution, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. All right, then the quote, but no need to go through the quote. And then after the compendium of ascertainments, it says, they are said to have determinate objects because they ascertain only particular objects. So they have particular objects. Ascertain here can be used in a loose sense. They don't always necessarily know their objects, but there's this determinate kind of quality to them, which of course means they're not omnipresent, because not every mind has that kind of, well, determinate quality to them, and they're all mental consciousnesses. So they're said to have determinate objects because they ascertain only particular objects in this order. A desired object. Here, desire doesn't refer to the affliction. In fact, I don't like to use the word desire in general. Well, I don't like to use the word desire, the general term desire, to speak of the afflictive mind, because desire can be something positive. I desire to become enlightened. I think it's good to add afflictive desire. This is similar to doubt, for instance. Not every doubt is afflictive. So that's when you add afflictive desire, you say to afflictive doubt. Similarly here, I think it's a good idea, because we don't have that many words in English. You need a lot of words for wishing or desiring or something, and desire is a little stronger than just wishing. Anyway, so here definitely desire doesn't refer to the affliction. So the first one, aspiration, requires a desired object. Resolution requires what is called a determined object. Mindfulness, an object of acquaintance, and concentration, an analyzed object. The last two require an analyzed object. So they have specific objects. It's determined that they have these objects, because otherwise they wouldn't work. They're therefore their function is determined by their object. Yeah. Then I'll read this quote because I think it's important. In relation to which determinate objects do any of the non-omnipresent mental factors arise? There are 4 types in this order: desire, determination, acquaintance, and analysis. The last is for concentration and wisdom, whereas the rest are for the first 3 in that order. So this is already going back to Venerable Tekcho's question in the past about how about if you focus for long enough on a non-existent object, could that turn into a direct perception? But this direct perception we're talking about, of course, would not be a yogic direct perception, but it's not just any odd direct perception like a sense direct perception, but it's a union of calm abiding and special insight. It's a union of calm abiding and special insight. So even concentration, that is part of that union. So it's also a special type of concentration, of course. It's a type of concentration that enables the mind, while being totally focused, to also subtly analyze. But it only arises in dependence on analysis. As we've just seen, the last is for concentration and wisdom, so it requires analysis. And then once you start analyzing, it becomes clear that that non-existent object doesn't exist. But anyway, let's continue reading this. No need to read the verse summary. What time is it? Yeah. First, to explain aspiration. The cause of aspiration is to see the qualities of the object and so on. The definition of aspiration is a mental factor that, upon observing a desired object, seeks to attain the thing by its own power. Very important, aspiration. What comes to mind when you hear aspiration? What kind of mind, what kind of central mind in Buddhism is very much described on the aspiration, on a particular type of aspiration? Pardon? Bodhicitta, absolutely. So an example is a mental factor that seeks to attain qualities that have not arisen in oneself in order to give rise to those qualities. Yes, so very important mental factor. Also, like aspiration, we know aspiration in the context of faith. There are 3 types of faith. So you have believing faith, you have what's called pure faith, or sometimes joyful faith, devotional faith, and then lastly aspirational faith, aspiring yourself. So for that it's very important. Okay, so yeah, all this is pretty clear. The compendium of knowledge then goes to say, I just skip through the parts in between. I don't think they're that important. They're basically saying the same thing. So the compendium of knowledge says, what is aspiration? It is the very wish. Okay, it here says wish or desire to be endowed with, or to be endowed with this or that attribute of a desired thing. Its function is to act as a basis for generating diligence. So that shows, I wonder, diligence. Diligence is, as far as I remember, a virtuous kind of mind. Yeah, it's a virtuous type of mind. So it wouldn't be an aspiration to rob a bank, I guess. I mean, no, it wouldn't work that way. Dumba, no. There could be desire, there could be attachment, but not that type. The function of aspiration is directly to produce diligence and indirectly to bring about an increase in all known good qualities. Yeah, so definitely, although it probably is virtues, but doesn't necessarily have to be, I guess. I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be virtues, I'm wondering. Yeah, that's debatable. Okay. When categorized, there are 3 types: aspiration wanting to meet with the object, aspiration wanting not to be separated from the object, and aspiration seeking to obtain the object. All right, so that's aspiration. Then you have resolution. In Tibetan, it's möpa. Möpa is often translated also as aspiration. It's also sometimes translated as interest. Interest very often, but here in this context it refers to resolution. The cause of resolution is to see, hear, or remember, and so on, the qualities of the object. The definition of resolution is a mental factor that by its own power, upon perceiving an object previously seen, heard, and so on, has the aspect of apprehending it to be just so. An example is an instance of a mental factor that in relation to an object ascertained through analysis thinks it is just so, in accordance with that ascertainment. So a type of certainty. It apprehends the ascertained thing to be just as it is ascertained, so it functions to prevent diversion. So that's from Compendium of Knowledge, Asanga's Compendium of Knowledge. So it's basically saying it's like a type of certainty. Again, very important for Buddhist practice. Without certainty, if we constantly doubt, that's why afflictive doubt in particular is a huge problem. Doubting for some time, doubt that gives rise, we had that whole discussion, gives rise to correct assumption is fine, but at some point we need certainty. Okay. According to the commentaries on the Treasury of Knowledge, resolution is not necessarily a mind that realizes its object, because they're non-virtuous resolutions. So here, as opposed to aspiration, which is based on this explanation we just went through, is purely virtues, here there are also non-virtuous resolutions that apprehend their objects in accord with false ascertainments. Okay. of determine. So the Sanskrit word adimoksha has the connotation of determining its object. Hence, it's called resolution. Resolution, certainty. Resolution, for me, it means much more like a New Year resolution. That's kind of like, I'm going to do such and such. I'm going to exercise from now on every day kind of thing. Whereas here it feels much more like a certainty.
There's another translation for this word. I can't think of what that is. Usually aspiration.
Where did you find another translation? I totally ignored mind in Tibetan Buddhism because it's so short on the mental factors. Merpa. Okay, I'll just continue, and then if you can look for it. Or did you find it?
I wonder if this is coming from this sense of being resolute, like this very determined kind of aspect.
Right. Yes. I guess that's where it comes from. Yeah, being resolute, being certain. I think that makes sense. It's just because it's got a second meaning. So, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. It's got that kind of connotation as well. The following differences between resolution and discernment. Resolution by its own power prevents diversion of the mind from its object, whereas discernment by its own power applies a classificatory convention to the object. Okay, does the classificatory convention, that again doesn't seem right. For a mental consciousness, that's true, but for the sense consciousnesses, not every discernment applies a classificatory convention. So we've already heard that every conceptual mind labels, so then that's okay. In the case of a conceptual mind, that works. But then again, of course, resolution would also be conceptual. Also, resolution by its own power apprehends its object to be just so. Unless you talk about like a Buddha's mind being certain, there's that function of certainty. But certainty implies that you don't know, right? There is certainty. So you're not, if you know, you don't say, I'm certain. So the Buddha has these mental functions, but they're not fully active. Like there's the function of aspiration, there's the function of being resolute, being certain, but they're not fully active because there's knowledge. Okay, so anyway, yeah, here we're talking about a conceptual mind and the continuum of sentient beings. So resolution by its own power apprehends its object to be just so, whereas discernment merely distinguishes its object. Okay. The function of resolution is such that in regard to an object's qualities of false or neither, it resolves the object to be just so and prevents diversion to something else. That makes sense. Okay, I want to read this quote from the Compendium of Ascertainments. Let's just skip that. And then it goes on to say the Compendium of Ascertainment categorizes it into three divisions: resolution perceiving good qualities in its objects, resolution perceiving faults in its object, and resolution perceiving neither good nor faults in its object. Okay, all right. The last category, I guess you could say, is the largest category because it includes everything else, and that makes sense, therefore, that you have this kind of certainty or resolute function of the mind. Then third, to explain mindfulness, the cause of mindfulness is great appreciation. And only objects with which one has developed prior familiarity can induce mindfulness. Appreciation, I have to look up the Tibetan. I don't remember what it is in Tibetan. Just a sec. Can you, Venerable Teacher, do you have it there?
Yeah.
Yes. What is it? What does it say in Tibetan?
Where is mind? The cause mindfulness. Shindu-kupa. Shindu-kupa.
Shindu-kupa. Sumba-temba-shabala, temba-yuni, Shindu-kupa. Ale Shindu-kupa. Kupa actually can mean appreciation. It can mean respect. Usually it's respect. Appreciation is fine then. Okay. So great appreciation. Yeah, that's better than respect. So great appreciation. All right. There must be some kind of appreciation. Otherwise, you wouldn't be mindful of it. You wouldn't want to be mindful of it, I guess. And only objects which one has developed prior familiarity can induce mindfulness. So something you're totally new to, you cannot be mindful of it. You cannot recollect it. Right? Like some idea you've never heard before. Can you not kind of well, it's harder, that's for sure. That's for certain. Like, I mean, for sure, you have a harder time doing that. But yeah. Anyway, again, it always opens new debate. I mean, it always gives rise to new debates, and that's good. So, like, what does that actually mean? What does mindfulness therefore mean? You always have to have familiarity, prior familiarity with what you're mindful of. Mindfulness arises from companionship with a virtuous friend, with the virtuous friend, which is another word for teacher usually, or like a gyushinin, like it's in English usually like a spiritual teacher, but maybe it's here. And again, let me just look up the Tibetan. Yeah, Shinyan Tropa. So it actually also includes like virtuous friends in the literal sense, like Dharma friends, listening closely to the instructions taught by the learned master, having a sense of shame and fear of being reproached by others, and respecting the holy person's advice. Okay, that's again very much a virtuous type. But it's not part of the virtuous action. So here it's described as something virtuous. And I said that previously, but I thought mistakenly that it was included in the virtuous mental factors, which it isn't. I forgot it's part of the determinate mental factors, or the ones with the determinate object. Yeah, so here it's very much described as something virtuous. Can you not be mindful of something non-virtuous? Again, another discussion or another debate. The definition of mindfulness is a mental factor that focusing on an object to which there has been previous familiarization prevents the forgetting of it by its own power. Nothing in that definition implies it has to be virtuous. So therefore, previously that was just an example. An example is mindfulness that recollects one's parents and siblings with whom one has been familiar since earliest childhood. That's a neutral kind of mind. Unless you recollect their kindness and their based on which you then want to repay their kindness and so forth. Compendium of knowledge just reinforces what has been explained, or just repeats what has been explained. And then it goes on, the text goes on to say, mindfulness has three distinguishing qualities. The distinguishing quality of its object, it's a familiar thing. The distinguishing quality of its aspect, not forgetting the object that it is focused on. So aspect again. So now it's the aspect of the mind itself, the kind of function of the mind itself. That's how the word aspect is used here. So not forgetting its object, or the mental factor, its main function. Not forgetting the object that is focused on. The distinguishing quality of its function. It prevents the mind from being distracted from the object and serves as the basis for the mind to remain continuously on that object. Okay, so that's here its specific function. There's a distinguishing quality, which is not forgetting the object, which is also its function. But then there's a distinguishing quality, its main kind of quality, preventing the mind from being distracted from the object, and it serves as the basis for the mind to remain continuously on that object. All right. But that's kind of attentiveness, isn't it? I mean, like when you have the three come together, meta-awareness, and then, alertness. Alertness, I wouldn't call it attention, but alertness or vigilance. Yeah. Again, okay. Never mind. Furthermore, since mindfulness does not arise if there is no prior familiarity, debatable, the distinguishing quality of the object is called the familiar thing. Since mindfulness does not arise if the familiar thing does not appear as an object to the mind right now, the distinguishing quality of the aspect is called the mind's not forgetting. Okay. So it's saying it's something more. So mindfulness always means there's an object of familiarity, because if we focus on something, or we try to be mindful, so-called mindful, with an object we're not familiar with, it's not actually mindfulness. Instead, it is not forgetting. Okay, fair enough. You want it? Yeah, that makes sense. All right. So that would be in response to that debate, something we're not familiar with. If we recall it, it's just called not forgetting. Right. Yeah. Can do that, can say that. And since the mind will become increasingly stable in dependence on mindfulness with these qualities, the distinguishing quality of the function is called the function of non-distraction. All right. That's kind of more the result, but okay, never mind. And since the mind will become increasingly stable in dependence on mindfulness, it will become increasingly stable. So it's the result of mindfulness. With these qualities, the distinguishing quality of the function is called the function of non-distraction. So it cannot be its distinguishing function because it's only the cause of that. Or does it say, it prevents the mind from being distracted from the object. It causes the mind not to be distracted. In that way, that makes sense, because that non-distraction only comes later. Texts such as clarifying the meaning of the treasury of knowledge mention that there are non-virtuous instances of mindfulness. Yes, absolutely, that makes sense. They say that non-virtuous mindfulness, as you can tell, I didn't read that text really well. Sorry. I thought I did, but I didn't. The notice thing is I didn't notice before. Merely collects an inference. So they say that non-virtuous mindfulness by its own power merely recollects an afflictive object, but does not cause a virtuous object to be forgotten. Yeah, I say that. Merely recollects an afflictive, but does not. Yeah. On the other hand, the non-virtuous factor of forgetfulness by its own power can either recollect an afflictive object or cause a virtuous object to be forgotten. To explain the etymology of the term, it is called mindfulness because it is mindful in not forgetting its object. All right. Through an object that is familiar with. All right. The function of mindfulness is to prevent movement of the mind away from the object and towards something else. However, the Compendium of Ascertainment says, what function does mindfulness have? It functions to recall the memory of what one has thought, done, and said a long time ago. From the point of view of recalling things thought of, actions done, and words spoken long ago, it functions to prevent movement of the mind away from the object. So it's just being just recalling the memory itself. That's what it's explained here. I guess that's a different way of looking at it, because it seems to contradict what was mentioned earlier. Anyway, yeah, so these mental factors, I mean, there are kind of slightly different explanations given in different texts. That's also possibly why we don't study this in so much detail, because there are so many different explanations. So it's good to listen to all of them and get kind of a rough sense what mindfulness is all about. But the moment we talk about the functions of the mind, there are so many varieties. I mean, even within mindfulness. So do you still call it mindfulness? Do you call it not forgetting? Yeah, it's very hard because it's so difficult to pinpoint these qualities. Every mind is so unique, and every person's mind being so different from everyone else's. So it becomes a little harder, and it's not something you can see. It's yeah, really hard to be aware of all these functions. When mindfulness is categorized according to the Compendium of Ascertainment, there are three divisions: being mindful of the mind's thoughts, the body's deeds, and the voice's utterance. So being aware basically on body, speech, and mind. I mean, the mind's thoughts can only be our own mind. And if you start with our own mind, it's also about being aware of the body and our own voice, what we're saying. So being aware of body, speech, and mind. Which, again, it makes sense that it works together with introspection or meta-awareness, and of course a certain degree of alertness. The effects of mindfulness are in reliance on mindfulness that does not forget the object. There's an ever greater increase within one's one's own continuum of all the qualities of concentration, single-pointedly placed on its object, and a wisdom engaged in fine investigation. So we can see that all these are very important starting off with aspiration, then certainty or resolution, and now mindfulness. Very important for our practice. Okay, then engaging the Bodhisattva deeds says the same thing. Never mind, we can skip that quote. So Shantideva speaks in this quote very much of applying mindfulness and meta-awareness. Again, those two together. Then you have concentration.
Yeshima,
Yes, please.
if it is a mental factor, it follows it is a mental factor with a determinate object.
Pardon? Say again.
If it is a mental factor,
yes,
it follows it's a mental factor with a determinate object.
Yes, yes. A determinate object means a familiarized object. Something you're familiar with. So not determinate in that it's, I don't know, always your breath or always your body and so forth, but determinate in the sense it must be something you're familiar with.
But every mental factor?
Every mental factor?
Yeah,
What do you mean?
Is any microphone working?
It's the one that's the camera.
I think I can
see.
hear. If you speak up, I can hear. Yeah, speak slowly.
So my question is,
Yeah.
if it is a mental factor, any
Yes.
mental factor,
Yes.
it follows it is a mental factor with a determinate object.
No. Not every mental factor has a determinate object.
For example,
For instance, an eye consciousness apprehending, like the what is it? The discernment that accompanies the eye consciousness apprehending Vas.
I see. But for example, anger, like what is, I mean, so my actual question is, what is it about these 5 mental factors
Oh, okay, the determined object. Well,
that
okay.
distinguish from like anger, for example, because anger also apprehends its object in a particular way.
Right. So aspiration, whenever you have aspiration, of course, aspiration doesn't arise with the sense consciousnesses, but whenever you have aspiration, it must be something that you desire. Right? With discernment, for instance, on the basis of a mental consciousness, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be something you desire. It doesn't have to be anything you're familiar with. Anything can be discerned.
Right. But whenever you have anger, for example, that is not a mental factor with a determinate object, or it's not within this classification, anger also, like, whatever object it apprehends,
Yeah.
it apprehends it like in a very particular way, right? It only sees the faults, it doesn't see the virtues. Like, it's also a kind of filter that sees its object in a particular way.
The thing is here, like, the omnipresent factors are out anyway because they're omnipresent. So even with feeling, you could say, okay, there's always pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, but they're the different categories, so they're out. The only thing we could do now, okay, we can look at the other. You see, I think it's not that, for instance, anger always perceives something as unattractive, but that's already part of the afflictive category. So it's saying, what is it of these mental factors that is unique but doesn't fit into any of the other categories? So it's not saying that there are not other mental factors that don't have a determinate object. Like I said, feeling, or when you have anger or attachment, for instance, it's always something you desire, always something.
Right.
But that is described from the point of view of being afflictive. So the only thing left of when you talk of these 5 different ones is that they're none of the other categories, but they have this particular determinate object. That they need a particular object. So in the case of aspiration, something you desire. In the case of determination, in the case of resolution, something that you're determined, you're certain about, acquaintance, and so forth. Right? And then you see, like, it doesn't matter the others also have maybe a determinate object, but we explain them from the point of view of other aspects they have that are considered to be more important. For instance, being afflictive, or the changeable ones. There may also, some of them have a determinate object, but it's much more the changeable quality of them. Right. So it's not like that they exclude each other, basically. I mean, some of them you can have a determinate, but it's easier to understand them from the point of view of having a specific kind of object. I guess that's what you could say. And again, it leaves
Right.
room open for debate. I mean, there's always some debate. You could basically say, well, why are they not part of the category of such and such? For instance, mindfulness here can be non-virtuous. So why is it not changeable? Why is it not changeable? Or,
Yeah.
yeah, so you could always debate. But I guess Asanga, mainly Asanga, he, according to his disciples, I mean, he gave this kind of division of mental factors and found that was easiest for his disciples to be understood in that way, I guess, right? Like going back historically. Yeah. But again, it's good to have a debate going.
Right. So, I mean, having a determinate object is not necessarily the thing that distinguishes them from others.
Well,
They are
here in
called
this
like,
category, it does. There is no other characteristic that allows for these 5 to be included in any of the other categories. Right? It's not afflictive, it's not virtues, the changeability is not pronounced enough. And they're really important for the development of virtue. I think that's the determinate object is not the only part of it, because as we've seen, they're really important for concentration and wisdom anyway, but mindfulness we need aspiration, we need resolution, this kind of certainty, really important for our practice, but they're not necessarily, at least the first 3. Oh, the first one we've heard, aspiration is virtuous, yes, but the other ones, they could be non-virtuous nevertheless, and still, yeah, they're part of this. I really can't, I can just only guess why Asanga did that. It's like pretending I know why, but this is just my opinion. Yeah. Okay, but it's good, just that asking that question is great, because it makes us think right away in a way in which previously I certainly haven't. So good question, yeah.
thank you.
Yashima, the other
yes.
way the mind and mental factors classifies resolution is belief. It's called belief there. Yeah,
Believe. Möpa.
Yeah.
Möpa. Yiche is usually translated as believe. Yeah, believe, I think it's not strong enough.
Of faith, you don't think that. I think that.
Möpa. Möpa can be translated, like I said, interest even. Like interest, sometimes it's aspiration. I've also seen it. Möpa Chöbesa. I think it was Geshtobden Jimba who translated it as an illumination of the intent. He translated it as aspiration, which in this context is fine. So believe.
Instead of resolution, the resolution one is.
Yeah, I know, the resolution. So I think in this context, I understand it more to be certainty.
Okay.
But it depends, like I said, many different texts explain them slightly differently. And then depending on who, like I'm thinking of the translators, they had a particular, maybe received a particular teaching, followed a particular instruction, and then based on that, you chose one word over another. Right? It's, yeah, like I said, they're not that clearly delineated always in the same way. They're delineated clearly, but by different texts in a slightly different way. Okay. All right. So where do we get for the function of mindfulness? We finished that. And then 4th, to explain concentration. The cause of concentration is twofold. Physical solitude away from social involvement, that is away from gatherings of many people, and mental solitude free from gross conceptualization, that is free from running after various objects of thought. So physical solitude and mental solitude. Mental solitude, of course, being central. The questions of Gagana Ganja Sutra says the accumulation of karma abiding unites physical solitude and mental solitude. Okay. So what is it? Furthermore, its causes are placing the mind on the object, mindfulness that does not forget its object, and diligence that places the mind again and again on the object. All right. So it depends on mindfulness and diligence, as Maitreya also says in his ornament for the Mahayana Sutras. Mahayana Sutra Alamkara. So the definition of concentration is a mental factor that by its own power stabilizes the mind single-pointedly on its object and functions as the basis of wisdom. Okay. An example is a mental factor that when fully focused on an attractive, on a pleasant object, a positive object, attractive, remains single-pointedly on that without moving away to something else. What is concentration? Single pointedness of the mind placed on the thing, investigate. So investigation is part of it. You do have investigation. For instance, in the instructions for calm abiding, it talks about, for instance, choosing the breath or choosing the image of a Buddha or of the Buddha. You should analyze this object first in order to be able to effectively focus on it. You need to understand it, basically. You need to understand it to be able to focus on it. And I'm thinking again and again back to Venerable Techo's question. So to analyze it, it's part of that. So to focus single-pointedly, you need to analyze it, and the degree of concentration is determined by a degree of analysis that precedes it, which again, sooner or later you figure out that thing doesn't exist, I would argue. Okay.
Don't the non-Buddhists spend a lot of time analyzing the self, but they don't come to the conclusion that it doesn't exist.
What do they focus on? Usually they focus on like the lower realms are not desirable, the higher realms are. Right?
The non-Buddhist schools,
yeah,
they analyze the appearance of the self, right?
Right, but do they actually generate calm abiding on the basis of that? That's the question. I don't know.
I don't see why not exactly.
Okay. All right. Okay, so a non-existent. It couldn't give rise to wisdom. It could give rise to a certain degree of concentration. Could it be calm abiding? All right. If you believe a certain state to be moksha or liberation, yeah, go ahead.
Don't they? It's not that they focus on they focus on the appearance, right? So it wouldn't be a non-existent.
So if they just focus on the appearance, that's different. But your original question was, could you focus on something that doesn't exist? Right? That was your original question. Could you focus on something for long enough that doesn't exist, and then that mind becomes a mental, not a direct perceiver, of course, but a non-conceptual mental consciousness? I think that was your original question.
Yeah, my question was related to the appearance of the self and whether the appearance of the self can be non-conceptual.
Oh, just the appearance of the non-existent self. The appearance of the non-existent self. Who would focus just on the appearance of the non-existent self? It's like it's like, come on, I believe it exists, kind of. And you take the non-Buddhist philosophers, right? So it's like, oh yeah, the appearance exists, but the rest I'm not sure. I just wonder who spends time and effort, without being sure this thing exists, and this, instead of, and it's just like being satisfied just with the appearance, but still wondering about. This requires so much determination and effort. People no longer do this nowadays. They're too distracted. So I guess you need to be really certain about things, and then you sit down to meditate on them. There is something about, like, when you study the different absorptions. I put these texts in the group yesterday, so you can read about them. And for instance, believing higher states, like the higher states, to be liberation. Like they're actually within samsara. You have the four form realms and the four formless realms, which I believe is a very fascinating topic, although it's kind of goes a little bit into the non-Buddhist views to a degree where, it discusses what they meditate on. So what they meditate on is perceiving some of these samsaric states to be moksha, to be liberation. To be liberation, to be nirvana, actually, like real nirvana. And so based on that, they attain these states. And so the question would be, do they focus on them being merely desirable, or do they focus on them being actual liberation? And if they do, then you have a wrong consciousness. Yes, you do have a wrong consciousness. But usually the way the texts describe it, they say like the lower realms are coarse, the higher realms are subtler, therefore desirable. Like even when they describe what the non-Buddhists focus on, they never say they focus on that being liberation. So maybe that's because that's not what they focus on. I don't know. Honestly, Venerable Teacher, I don't know. To be honest.
There's
Yeah.
the third aspect of the truth of cessation
Yes.
does refute this view. So it is a common view, right? It refutes that certain samadhis are liberation.
That's
or
right.
blissful states.
Yes, that's true. Yes,
if it's one of the four aspects, then it would have to be a very common wrong view.
No, but that there's no doubt that moksha, that it's not moksha. I mean, of course, that's what I said. Like what the non-Buddhists assert to be liberation is not considered to be liberation from a Buddhist point of view. Yes, absolutely. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if a non-Buddhist wants to be reborn, let's say in the first form of in the first form realm. There are 4 levels of the form realm, so they want to be reborn in the first level. How do they achieve that? By focusing on the desire realm as coarse and that first level as subtle, as desirable, which is fine. It is in comparison. One is coarse, one is subtle, but it doesn't mention in the text that they focus on the desire realm as good old samsara and the first concentration as moksha. It doesn't mention that. But maybe they could, because they do sometimes believe that to be liberation. They do believe these states to be liberation, these form and formless realm state to be liberation. And yes, as you said, it's not. Obviously, from a Buddhist point of view, it's not. But can they focus on the first concentration being moksha and based on that attain calm abiding? That's the question. And then even further, special insight. According to what's in here, actually no. Because calm abiding, special insight is wisdom. So you have to have a union of calm abiding and special insight before you can actually attain the first concentration. But let's leave it open. In the text, it never mentions it. I believe it always talks about the coarser being the lower realms, like the desire realm being coarse, and the higher realms being subtle. That's all it mentions. So okay. Anyway, thank you. That's a great question. So I don't know. All right. So how much do we have left? I think we can definitely finish tomorrow. So I'll do the rest of it tomorrow. On wisdom, and then we'll only have those changeable factors left.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dedication. Having
Yes,
thoroughly
please.
investigated the day and night with the four disciplines, my born reflection of these topics of contemplation, may this discernment sever all doubts.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sometimes maybe not you have to tomorrow. We should now on the online.
Yeah,
She's in Germany. Ornella too.
Ornella, I think it's on. Let me just turn it.
In order to stop the recording, you have to leave the Zoom.
Uh,
But